Hey, welcome to 12 Tone. Choruses are hard. They're the hook, the part everyone remembers, so a boring chorus can ruin even the greatest song. Or put another way, a song with a boring chorus probably isn't that great to begin with. With so much pressure riding on the chorus, writing a good one can seem daunting, but fortunately, music theory is here to help. Or at least it's here to make things a whole lot more complicated, but hopefully that winds up helping. We'll see. Before we talk about what makes a good chorus, though, we first have to talk about what a chorus is. This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. Okay, so the first thing we need to ask is, what are song sections for? What purpose do they serve? And the simplest answer is that song sections divide time. They take the continuous experience of listening to a piece of music and chop it up into smaller, more digestible chunks, typically between 8 and 16 bars, although the exact lengths of certain sections is a whole can of worms we really don't need to be opening right now. The point is, a section marks a single musical location within a song, and the boundaries between sections are typically defined by significant changes in musical material. But it's more than that. Section labels tell us not just when we transition somewhere new, but also when we transition back to somewhere we've already been. They mark out patterns of repetition within a song. Like in the classic jazz form AABA, the entire point is that the first, second, and fourth sections are all basically the same with similar melodies and chord progressions, while the third section provides contrast by doing something different. These patterns of repetition turn songs from long strings of unrelated musical ideas into coherent self-referencing structures, allowing them to establish clear, distinct musical identities. Like when you play the second verse, it requires less work from your listeners because they've already heard the first verse, so they know what to expect. But it's more than that, too. Section labels also convey information about the role of the section within the piece. If we're talking about Lizzo's Truth Hurts and I tell you I really like the 7th section, you'd have to go back and listen to the song to figure out which one I meant. Heck, you might not even agree with how I counted them, leading you to identify a different 7th section than the one I was referring to. But if I tell you I like the chorus and you're at all familiar with the song, you'll immediately know I'm talking about this. We have a sense not just of where the chorus falls, but what a chorus is, and more importantly, what it's for. This brings us to Dr. William Kaplan's model of formal functions, or the idea that different sections of a song have specific functions or jobs to do. This is, in a sense, a pretty familiar concept. Anyone who studied Western music has probably encountered the idea of functional harmony, which assigns various roles and behaviors to different chords within a key. The 1 chord is at rest, the 5 chord points you home, and so on. Formal functions simply take this idea of prescribed behaviors and apply it to song form. Now, I'm not going to get into Kaplan's list of functions. He was writing about classical music, which has a very different approach to form than the pop and rock music I'm interested in. That said, while we won't be using his functions, the general idea that different sections have specific purposes and perform specific tasks within the overall structure of the piece is still going to be useful and relevant. So what function does a chorus have? Well, you may have noticed that up to now I've avoided actually defining a chorus, and there's a good reason for that. It's really hard to do. The chorus is, at heart, a relative label. That is, our understanding of which part of a song is the chorus depends a lot on its relation to other sections, especially the verse. Like, let's check out some definitions. Google defines a chorus as
part of a song that is repeated after each verse, typically by more than one singer.
The Cambridge Dictionary says it's
part of a song that is repeated several times, usually after each verse.
And Merriam-Webster says it's simply
a part of a song or hymn recurring at intervals.
These definitions all have two things in common. First, they focus on the fact that the chorus repeats, and second, they're bad. They tell us next to nothing about the musical elements that define a chorus. All we know is that, at least according to Google, they tend to include background singers. Fortunately, some theorists have also taken a crack at defining choruses. Dr. Ken Stevenson defines it as
a musical section that recurs numerous times with a fixed text of several lines,
which gives us a bit more information. Dr. John Kovac calls it
usually the most important or easily remembered section of a song, containing the title and the catchiest musical material,
which starts to speak to the chorus's function, and Dr. Walter Everett defines it as
a song's section, nearly always affirming tonic, usually appearing in the song's interior with lyrics that remain constant with each hearing.
Which gives us some indication of the specific musical characteristics we'd expect a chorus section to have. These definitions are better, but they're still not perfect, and that's to be expected. Definitions can be useful tools, but the problem with relying on them is that they're extremely rigid, and that's not really how we think about these sorts of categories. Like, consider the great internet debate, is a hot dog a sandwich? Now, to be clear, I don't care. I have no horse in this race. Please don't tell me your opinions. I am not interested. But the reason this became a thing in the first place is that to many people, a hot dog doesn't feel like a sandwich, but most simple definitions of sandwiches, like filling between pieces of bread, fail to exclude it. We can try to refine our definition by, say, requiring that the pieces of bread be separate rather than connected like in a hot dog bun, but then we're also ruling out hoagies, which do feel like sandwiches. It turns out it's incredibly difficult to come up with a good, clear definition of a sandwich that successfully includes everything we think should count without accidentally including hot dogs as well. And this may seem like a weird quirk of hot dogs, but it's actually a problem with the concept of definitions. You see, when we try to define something, we're making the unspoken assumption that our definition is both necessary and sufficient. That is, we're assuming that everything that meets our definition is an equally good example of the thing we're trying to define, and everything that doesn't meet it simply isn't that thing at all. And this assumption works great for a category like, say, prime numbers. If you've got a whole number greater than 1 that isn't divisible by anything but itself, that's a prime, and if you've got any other number with any other set of properties, it's not. But the same assumption doesn't work nearly as well for a category like sandwiches. There are some things like a BLT that are clear prototypical examples of the idealized sandwich, and others, like a hot dog, that bear a family resemblance but lack some abstract sense of definitive sandwichness. They may be a part of the group, but they aren't a good example of it. And believe it or not, the same thing happens with song sections. Like, consider the Billie Eilish song Bury a Friend. By my count, there are 6 unique sections distinguished by differences in melody, vocal delivery, and accompaniment. If you asked me to pick which one was the chorus, I'd probably say this. What do you want from me? Why don't you run from me? Because it repeats more than anything else with the same lyrics each time, has a relatively high, elaborate, and catchy melody, and ends the song. But it's also fairly low sonic energy, which is unusual. A chorus is supposed to be a climax, the biggest, most exciting part of the song, and this isn't that. In fact, you might even be able to make an argument that the chorus is this. Bury a friend, try to wake up. Which still repeats, has more going on in the accompaniment, and as a bonus, it includes the name of the song, which, as we'll discuss in a bit, is a fairly common feature of choruses. So, which is it? Well, I think it's pretty obviously the first one, with the second serving as part of the pre-chorus, but it seems to be lacking some of the traditional elements we'd expect from a chorus. Just like the hot dog, it's a member of the category, but not a great example of it. Compare that to, say, Living on a Prayer. I don't think there's any ambiguity that the chorus of that song is this. It has pretty much everything we'd expect to see in a chorus, all wrapped up in a neat, clear package. When we hear it, we immediately recognize it not just as the chorus of the song, but as a chorus full stop. It's a perfect example of chorushood. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that makes it better songwriting or that Living on a Prayer is a better song. For what Bury a Friend is trying to do, using a less obvious chorus is an effective choice. More on that later. But if we want to understand what we mean when we say chorus, we can learn a lot more from examining Living on a Prayer. It's the BLT of choruses. Bon Jovi, electric guitar, and tomato, I don't know. Anyway, this puts us in line with an approach proposed by Dr. Trevor de Klerk, who chose to focus not on definitions, but on prototypes. In a prototype-based system, we don't assume that any single characteristic, or even any set of characteristics, is necessary. Instead, our understanding of what belongs in the group comes from looking at particularly good examples of that group and identifying a set of overlapping characteristics that they seem to mostly share. In this sense, being a chorus isn't a clearly defined binary where something either is or is not. Instead, the more chorus-like characteristics a section has, the more it's going to feel like a chorus. This leaves room for songs like Bury a Friend, where the chorus lacks many of the traditional elements, but still has more than any other section. As an aside, I'm pretty sure the theorists I quoted earlier knew this, at least at some level, because most of their definitions left space for exceptions. Consider Kovac's use of the word usually, or Everett's nearly always. These qualifiers make their definitions less definition-y by allowing for the possibility that a chorus could contain only some or even none of the elements they identified. So yeah, I don't mean to imply that they're bad theorists just because they tried to provide a definition, nor do I mean to imply that those definitions represent their complete understandings of what a chorus is. They were just good examples for the point I was trying to make. Back to de Klerk though, he lays out quite a few characteristics that tend to appear in prototypical choruses. I'm going to divide them into 2 categories based on what I consider to be the 2 primary functions of the chorus section. The first of these are the climactic behaviors. The arrival of the chorus is, in many songs, a big event, and they deliver those musical climaxes in a number of ways. These behaviors align with Dr. Asaf Perez's model of sonic functions, which I already made a video about, link in the description, but basically choruses tend to use sound in ways that generate high levels of sonic energy. The most obvious of these is dynamics. Chorus sections are generally louder than verses. Compare the verse of Smells Like Teen Spirit to the chorus. In that example, we also see that they tend to have higher melodies. Singing powerfully in your upper register takes a lot of effort, and choruses capitalize on that by leaning on the high notes. Probably the most important way that choruses display climactic function, though, is with an increase in texture. That is, adding more instruments, or if everyone's already in, playing the existing instruments in ways that produce more sound. In I Write Sins, Not Tragedies, the verse is mostly accompanied by strings, while the chorus introduces drums and an electric guitar. I chime in with the haven't you people ever heard of? In My Immortal, the piano switches from arpeggios in the verse I'm so tired of being here to full chords in the chorus. When you cried, and of course there's the most common texture change of all, the one so obvious even Google thought to mention it. Background singers. In Chain of Fools, the extra voices are pretty much the only textural difference between the verse and the chorus, and yet it couldn't be clearer which was which. Changes in texture are among the most notable, obvious ways of delivering a musical climax, and across genres, choruses are full of them. But there's some more subtle climactic behaviors as well. Many songs, like Have a Cigar, will write the verse in a minor key, and then switch to a related major key for the chorus. This brightens the mood, creating a sense of triumphant arrival and escape from the dull, dark sound of the verse. Choruses are also more likely to have cadential melodies, that is, melodies that end by landing strongly on the root. In Industry Baby, the verse melody emphasizes the third, while the chorus features a dramatic walk down to one. This provides a sense of closure while the verse remains open-ended. Choruses also sometimes have a faster harmonic rhythm, that is, the chords may change more often, creating more of a sense of motion. In The Man Who Sold the World, the verse holds each chord for 2 bars, we spoke of was and when, while the chorus changes every bar. This phenomenon is especially noticeable in songs like Paradise City, where the verse is sung over a riff implying mostly static harmony, while the chorus introduces an actual chord progression. Choruses are also most often the final structural section of a song. There may be an outro afterwards, but relatively few songs end on a verse, and even fewer on a pre-chorus or bridge. By being the last thing you hear, the chorus establishes itself as the ultimate climax, but it also demonstrates our second function, memorability. The chorus is the hook, the part of the song that gets stuck in your head, and many prototypical behaviors help reinforce that effect. The most obvious of these is lyrical repetition. Verses tend to have new words every time, while choruses usually repeat. I'm not going to bother showing an example of this because honestly it'd be harder to find a song that doesn't do it, but repeated lyrics are only the tip of the iceberg. Another key feature in a chorus's memorability is simplified melodic rhythms. In Danny California, the verse has a bunch of irregular 16th note syncopation, in Alabama, she would swing a hammer, while the chorus just hits every offbeat 8th note. This makes it easier to remember the shape of the melody, and combined with a generally slower vocal delivery, reduces the total number of words in the section. Relatedly, choruses tend to have shorter phrases. In Do I Wanna Know, the entire verse is kind of one rambling 16-bar phrase that's way too long to play without getting a copyright strike, but the point is each line flows into the next with no clear start or end point. In the chorus, on the other hand, do I wanna know if this feeling flows both ways? The phrases mostly fit neatly into nice clean 2-bar boxes. These shorter phrases break the chorus up into smaller repeated chunks that are again easier to remember. And then there's the subcategory of overview behaviors. Many songs follow a narrative structure where the verses describe specific events and the chorus tells you how to feel about them. This shift happens primarily in the lyrics, most commonly with a change in perspective. Take Me to Church starts by combining first and third person pronouns. My lover's got humor. She's the giggle at a funeral, describing this woman to an uninvolved listener. In the chorus, though, he switches to first and second person, speaking directly to her. We also see this in Living on a Prayer, where the verse is a third-person description of Tommy and Gina's circumstances, while the chorus is a first-person declaration from Gina's perspective. This puts you directly in her shoes so you can really understand the couple's determination. These overview behaviors can also be non-lyrical. One could argue, for instance, that changing from minor to major constitutes a shift in perspective as well, but if so, then it's likely in support of those lyrical changes. And speaking of lyrics, another memorability behavior is the use of the song's title. Most of the time, if the title is anywhere in the lyrics, it's in the chorus. Now, whether this counts as a musical element or not is a little bit questionable. I mean, if you don't know the name of the song, you won't pick up on this, so you could argue it's not really a part of the music itself. But often, even if it's your first time hearing it, there are musical clues that could help you identify the title. Like if I play you this... Do you think you could guess what that song was called? And yeah, that's a particularly obvious example, but many songs emphasize their title by repeating it multiple times or placing it in important metric spots like the beginning or the end of the section, or in quite a few cases, both. So yeah, containing the title itself may be a bit of a stretch, but I think it's reasonable to say that most choruses contain a key emphasized phrase that sticks out as the most memorable lyric in the song. It just so happens that songwriters tend to use that line as the title. Even when they don't though, like in Bullet with Butterfly Wings, there's still usually some kind of lyrical hook. Beyond making the song easier to recognize, these sorts of memorability behaviors also serve another purpose. They create opportunities for participation. Like, if you're familiar with Dragula, you might never have realized that Rob Zombie sings this. I am the dog hound of hell, you cry. But you damn sure know when to shout. This allows the audience to connect more deeply with the song, becoming not just passive observers, but active contributors to their own musical experience and the experience of the people they're listening with. Memorable choruses are a community event. There's a lot more prototypical behaviors out there, and if you can think of any I missed, please do let me know in the comments, but I think it's time to get back to our initial question. How do you write a great chorus? Well, the obvious answer would be to try to include as many of these behaviors as possible in order to make sure it's performing the correct function. If you've written a chorus and it's not sounding right, look for ways to make it more climactic, more memorable, or both. But it's not quite that simple. Remember Bury a Friend? Remember how it only sort of had a chorus? Well, it turns out that you can get just as much mileage from subverting these tropes as you can from following them. Your audience has certain expectations that they've learned from listening to a bunch of songs with choruses, and choosing not to meet those expectations can create an uneasy sense of ambiguity. On the extreme end are songs like Where Is My Mind, where the chorus abandons all climactic behaviors, instead removing multiple instruments and dropping the melody down low, but it still feels like a chorus because it leans really hard on those memorability behaviors with a single short repeated vocal phrase. You can't subvert all the tropes at once, so you'll wind up with something that just doesn't feel like a chorus at all, but when done carefully, these sorts of anti-choruses can be really effective too. And then there's songs like Despacito, where the chorus does feel like a climax, but then it continues on into an even more energetic post-chorus. In these cases, you have to be careful not to give your chorus too much juice, because otherwise you'll have nothing left to build to. Notice how Despacito keeps its chorus melody fairly low, reducing its climactic impact and allowing room for the higher post-chorus. So, unfortunately, there's no magic formula for a great chorus, but that doesn't mean there's no trick to it, and it certainly doesn't mean this whole exploration was pointless. Hopefully. As with so many other aspects of songwriting, I think the secret here is intentionality. If you understand exactly what a prototypical chorus sounds like, you can lean into it when it suits your needs and pull back when it doesn't. You can play around with the boundaries between verses, choruses, and other sections, developing hooks from whichever components are most appropriate for your song, but in order to do that, you have to know where the boundaries are. If you enjoy these sorts of deep dives into really specific musical questions, you might be interested in checking out my podcast, Ghost Notes. It's a collaboration with Noah from Polyphonic, one of the best music channels out there, and every month we spend like an hour exploring every aspect of some complex musical topic, like how important is composition, what can we learn from music we don't like, or what even is music, really, if you think about it. New episodes come out every month, and we've also started doing a side series where we bring on awesome guests from other channels to talk about their perspective on music, so now there's even more Ghost Notes content to check out, and if you're interested in hearing what we've been doing, the best place to do that is Nebula. Nebula is a streaming platform built by some of YouTube's top top educators like Adam Neely, Mia Mulder, and Minute Physics, and Nebula also produces Ghost Notes, so every episode is available a month early to Nebula members. If you want to hear the latest episodes as soon as they're released, we've even worked out a deal with CuriosityStream, where if you sign up for CuriosityStream with the link in the description, not only will you get 26% off an annual plan, you'll also get a free Nebula account for as long as you remain a CuriosityStream member. For just $15 a year, you'll get access not just to everything on Nebula, including Ghost Notes and a bunch of other original podcasts, but also CuriosityStream's library of thousands of documentaries, including personal favorites like Can a Computer Write a Hit Musical, which puts our understanding of things like song form to the ultimate test. Again, link in the description. And hey, thanks for watching, thanks to our Patreon patrons for making these videos possible, and extra special thanks to our featured patrons, Susan Jones, Jill Sundgaard, Duck, Howard Levine, and Warren Hewart. If you want to help out and help us pick the next song we analyze too, there's a link to our Patreon on screen now. Oh, and don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, and above all, keep on rockin'.